6:30.
Got to make sure we leave enough time for all the people come flooding in.
I know. Wait for somebody to walk in. We started early and that's your comment period. All right, there's 6:30. So good evening. I'd like to welcome you and call to order the December 17th Port Orchard City Council regular meeting, our last meeting of the year. So please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
One nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice.
Yeah, that's his pro.
Sorry. And I'd like to remind us in the actions we're about to take this evening of our guiding principles, which are we raising the bar in all of our actions? Are we honoring the past but not living in the past? Are we building positive connections with our community and outside partners? And is the decision-making process a diverse, equitable, and inclusive to our community? All right, we have a published agenda. Are there any proposed amendments? Councilmember Trenary?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to add the addition of amendment of contract number 101-21 with the Master's Touch for utility printing, billing, and mailing services as presented earlier today to our consent agenda. Second.
Motion by Councilmember Trenary, a second by Councilmember Diener did it that. I stumbled there for a moment. And this was emailed to you earlier today. There's a hard copy on the dais. Any question? We're tossing on the consent agenda. You did see the cost doubled, and that's because of the growth in the number of statements we're mailing out and cost of postage and envelopes and paper and everything else going up. So that's why it costs that much more. Councilmember Trenary?
Mr. Mayor, that would be addition letter I to the
I
consent agenda.
I to the consent agenda. Okay. Any questions about that as we add it to the consent agenda?
I just have a question. This company is from Spokane. Does our stuff, how do they, are they here or?
We send them an electronic file, and then they process that, print those statements, stuff those statements, put postage on them, and then get them out in the mail.
From there, okay. Oh,
Other questions? Council?
No, after we vote.
Chang, go ahead.
Yes, I'd like to remove consent and.
We got an action item.
Oh, sorry.
So we're voting on adding a consent item I, which is the Master's Touch contract. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Hearing none, that has been added to the consent agenda. Councilmember, go ahead, Morrissey, you were first.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to motion to table business item 7B to a date certain, that is January 14th. We got a little more work to do before we put this to a final vote here on council, and like to move that to January, please.
Second.
A motion and a second. I just defer to the attorney. Should we do that when we get to that action item, or is it appropriate to do it right now?
I think it's fine if you wanted to do it as part of finalizing your agenda.
All right. I just want to make sure I wasn't violating any of the Roberts rules. So, all right. So we Councilmember Morrissey is asking to move this to a date certain, which would be January 14th, our next council meeting, to allow his committee to do a bit more work on this process. All in favor of moving?
oh, I just had a question. Now, with all the LTAC and all the businesses, so it's no big deal for them to go another month or so?
So these are funds for next year, not
Right.
this year. So yeah, they wouldn't have been receiving these funds here before the end of the year.
Yeah.
Events and activities typically are
Exactly.
happening in the summer. In this, so.
Okay.
All right. All in favor of it's not continuing. What did
Table.
tabling it to January business item B to January 14th, the lodging tax recommendation. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? None. That item has been moved to January 14th. Councilmember Chang, did you have one also?
Yeah, I just wanted to pull consent item G and move it to business.
That would make it the new, we'll call it F, but It's really E because everything moved up.
I will second that.
Motion is second to pull consent item G, which is the approval of an invoice with Kitsap Regional Coordinating Council for the ADU program. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, that has been moved to business. Any other amendments?
Yes, I would like to pull the F over by the, on the consent agenda to business, and that has to do with Western Washington University small businesses.
Second to move that?
Second.
Motion and a second to move consent item G, F, to make it business item G, which relates to the contract with Western Washington Small Business. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That's been moved. So let me make some notes here real quick so that when we get to this. F. All right. Got all kinds of ink on my paper. Any more amendments to the agenda? Motion to approve the amended agenda. Councilmember Rosepepe.
Mayor, I move to approve the agenda as amended.
Second.
Motion by Councilmember Rosepepe, a second by Councilmember Morrissey to approve the agenda as amended. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none. Yes, sir? I see your hand raised. You go ahead, Eric.
Yeah. I was going to ask, since I'm on the consent agenda, am I allowed to vote on that?
Where are you on the consent agenda?
You are placing us in our committees. Oh no, is that a business item? I apologize to you.
Consent item C.
And so if you look a little closer, those aren't the,
Appointments.
they're not the council ones, Councilmember Warden, so they're like planning commission, things like.
No. Correct. I'm on. I'm on an appointed one.
LEOF, the LEOFF board?
Yeah.
Does that one get approved by the council? I didn't think it did. Okay.
It's on the consent. Yeah.
I don't
good catch.
see any harm in you voting for that, in that appointment, in this process, unless you.
I'll vote for myself for sure. Yeah.
Okay, all right. Fair enough. We'll count you as a yay.
All right. Thanks.
Even
All
put
right.
his name on.
Good question, though.
All right.
All right, we're gonna move on our citizen comment period. We have nobody in the audience. Is there anybody online, Brandy? If you wish to address the council, use the raise your hand feature.
Greg Krabby raised his hand, and he should be able to talk at this time.
Mr. Krabby, go ahead.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Oh, good evening, Council, Mr. Mayor. My name is Greg Krabby. I'm here this evening on behalf of McCormick Communities. And as you may see on your agenda, we have a final plat up for vote this evening. I just want to talk about a couple things. Item one, I want to commend and thank staff for working diligently to get everything done. Getting these final plats wrapped up and ready to present to you takes quite a bit of coordination and work between your different departments and field people, and they did a great job during a very busy end of the year period. So thank you for that. The second item is the last time I brought a final plat to you, council asked if we had any affordable housing in McCormick Woods and in that development. And this evening, this particular final plat has 44 alley-loaded lots, which are only 40 feet wide. This is a product type that is only now allowed because of code changes and really a significant rewrite of your code several years ago. We like this product type. It will be a much smaller housing footprint than what is typically in McCormick Woods. And what is really exciting about it is that it was well received by our builders. And this was kind of a test. We weren't sure if it was going to work. It looks like it's going to work very well. In fact, we are processing plans for another 25 of this type of housing in the next division in McCormick West. You know, I can't tell you what the price point will be. I think for some folks, it probably doesn't meet the definition of affordable housing, but it will certainly be much more affordable than what has been built in the past. And so with that, I thank you for your efforts and look forward to your vote.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Krabby. Is there anyone else online, Brandy, that wishes to address the council?
Not at this time.
Okay, I will close the first citizen comment period. We're to our consent items, which now comprise of items A, B, C, D, E, F and G have been removed. H is still there, and we have a new item I, which is the Master's Touch contract. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda? Councilmember Rosepepe.
Mayor, I move to approve the consent agenda as amended.
Seconded.
Motion by Councilmember Rosepepe, a second by Councilmember Terneri to approve the amended consent agenda. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Is there anyone opposed? Hearing none, the consent agenda passes unanimously. We have a presentation tonight, and it's fairly lengthy. It's about the Foster Pilot Program, and I believe we have a consultant online that's going to give us a bit of a history lesson and tell us where we're at in this process that's been going on for quite some time. So, Mr. Ryan, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, council members. Here to provide background for the Foster Water Right Pilot Project and an overview, and then to cover our next steps as far as a draft mitigation plan. We have Thomas Pors, who is a water law attorney specializing in obtaining water right permits. Also in attendance that I'll be helping present is Joe Becker, who is the principal hydrologist with Robinson Noble. These gentlemen have been part of the Foster pilot for the city of Port Orchard since the beginning. It's been several years. Following the presentation, we will look for council to give a nod about our next steps, which will be engaging our stakeholders, our partners, and our tribal neighbors. So I'll turn it over to Tom and Joe. Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis, and good evening. I'm Tom Pors. I've been a water rights attorney in Washington State for 35 years now, and have been working with the city of Port Orchard for about the last 8 to 10 of those years, helping to manage water right applications. And Joe Becker is the hydrogeologist working with the city and leading the permitting team since we obtained the pilot project authority. So the purpose of the presentation tonight is to bring the city council up to speed on the status of pending water right applications, and to explain that process because it's somewhat unique in the state of Washington. City of Port Orchard is one of 5 approved pilot projects to demonstrate a flexible concept in mitigation for groundwater applications. And that's a good thing because it may be impossible to obtain the kind of water rights that we're looking for the 50-year future growth of the city without that authority. Is the presentation lined up and ready to go? I don't, or am I supposed to share that on my screen?
We do have it ready, so if you just
great. Okay.
If you just tell us
Yeah.
on the slide, we'll proceed when you say.
Yeah, you could put that into presentation mode. There it is, and start with the next slide. So this is basically our agenda tonight, is to explain the status of the city's water supply system and future needs, and the water right permitting process. That includes discussion of a little background involving some Supreme Court cases that got us where we are, and explaining this pilot project authority that we obtained from the legislature about 6 years ago. We'll also talk about what we've accomplished on these applications so far and what the remaining tasks are. And finally, we want to take your questions and also ask, basically for the staff and the consultants working on this project to get a consent from the council to begin negotiating mitigation agreements, which is one of the final steps in the process. Next slide, please. So by way of background, in 1998, the city purchased the McCormick system and committed to supply future development in that development with its water system. After a couple of decades, the city determined that it had insufficient water resources to continue supplying growth at McCormick, and there was a moratorium that was put in place on building permits. I don't know if Nick Bond is in the room tonight to help explain if there's any questions about this, but essentially what happened with that moratorium is that the city negotiated an interlocal agreement with Bremerton with an exchange of resources that provided an additional source of supply that allowed it continuing development at McCormick. And the city updated its agreement with the McCormick communities, committing to serve an additional 2,000 homes in exchange for the developer providing water infrastructure. That basically includes the well 12, a new storage tank, and intertie. Now, we know that additional water rights will be needed to serve all of that development and the city's other future needs, as well as to provide system-wide resiliency as we try to go from an aging water system to an updated modern system with new infrastructure. Next slide, please. Sorry, next slide.
We're frozen right now. There
Okay.
we go.
So a little background on water rights law. Until the year 2000, it was relatively easy for cities to obtain new groundwater rights, but that's the year that the Supreme Court issued the Postema decision, essentially recognizing that groundwater is connected to surface water and that new groundwater rights could not be approved by the Department of Ecology if they were impairing in-stream flows or streams that were closed to further appropriation. And there are a number of small streams on the Kitsap Peninsula that could be impacted by groundwater withdrawals by the city of Port Orchard. So that immediately had an effect on permitting by the city. Another significant development was 2015 when the Supreme Court issued what's called the Foster decision, Foster versus City of Yelm. And this was a denial of by the Supreme Court after Ecology had approved a new groundwater permit for the City of Yelm. And basically the Supreme Court held that when it comes to protecting in-stream flows and closed streams, new groundwater appropriations essentially have to have perfect mitigation. They have to mitigate all impacts in time, in place, and in kind, meaning water for water exactly as the impact happens. And that's a virtually impossible standard to meet scientifically. About that same time, the city amended some pending water right applications based on a need for new wells higher up in its system in the 580, 630 zone. And within a couple of years, the legislature, in response to an outcry about the Foster case and also it related to permit exempt wells in rural areas, they adopted a law that included the Foster pilot program. Next slide, please. So that law was the Stream Flow Restoration Act. And what that act does for groundwater applications was to designate 5 pilot projects, of which the city of Port Orchard is one. And for those projects, it replaces the impairment standard under the Water Code with a flexible mitigation sequence. So this is the process that we're involved in on a scientific and engineering basis. And pursuant to that authorization, we mitigate for impacts to the streams under Tier 1 by avoiding impacts, that's saving water. Tier 2 is minimizing impacts by replacing the water where it's reasonably available. And Tier 3 is compensation. And here the city could resort to out-of-kind mitigation if there is net ecological benefit provided. Next slide, please. So this slide is basically showing all of the elements of work that has been done and is in the process of being finished on the city's water right applications, basically starting with a updated population forecast and water demand forecast, the identification of new wells and storage that's required, and then there's hydrogeology work, groundwater modeling, mitigation planning, which is where we are right now. And we'll talk about these things in a proposed kind of projected schedule for getting to a final decision throughout the rest of the presentation. Next slide. I'm going to stop here and ask Joe Becker to introduce himself and then provide some information about the next several slides relating to demand forecasting, population forecasts, and the hydrogeology work that's been done. Joe?
Thank you, Tom. So I'm Joe Becker. I'm a senior principal hydrogeologist with Robinson Noble, which is now also Terraphase Engineering. I've been working in water in Washington State for about 40 years and working specifically with Port Orchard on their water rights for the past 5 or 6 years, along with Tom. So the first step that we needed to do in this process is determine how much impact the proposed water rights are going to have on the area streams that are closed or have in-stream flows. And the first step of that is determining how much water the city needs in the future. And the first step of that is estimating the population to be served by the water system. So the city, when they did their water system plan, hired a consulting engineer, and they developed a population forecast, which you can see here. We, under the city's water rights, wanted to go out 50 years, so you don't have to repeat this process again anytime soon. So we extended that population forecast out for another number of years to 50. We started the process in 2018. That's why we end in 2068, which is 50 years from when we started. Next slide, please. Now, because we're talking about so far in the future and this Foster pilot program presents such a unique opportunity, we had to think about what may happen, not planned yet, but may happen in the future as it concerns your water rights. So that included the city possibly taking on and serving other parts of the UGA. And so we looked at what would happen if the city did that and how that population would also be need to be taken care of with the new water rights. And so that's now this population graph with a projection of what one possibility of how the city might add serving the UGA. So this is the population then we use to generate the water demands. Next slide. So this is a little complicated, but let me explain. So water rights basically include two parts. They include not to exceed limits for an instantaneous production in gallons per minute and an annual production in acre feet per year. So this chart shows the projected water demands based on that previous projected population for the water system over the next 50 years. So the bottom chart, the blue line, represents the maximum daily projected demand over the 50 years. And then the red line represents what your current water rights are, your instantaneous water rights are in gallons per minute. So that shows that roughly in the year 2037, you would run out of available water rights to serve the city's water system in terms of instantaneous water rights. In terms of annual water rights, projected demand is the green line on the upper chart. And the purple line is what your current water rights are projected to be. And that gets you out to about 2057 before you run out of annual rights. Next slide, please. So with the applications that you have in, if they are approved, this shows you where you would stand. So in the instantaneous water rights and the maximum daily demand, if the new rights are approved, you're good until 2068. If the annual rights are approved, you see the purple line moves up, again, you're good till 2068. So that's what we're trying to get you these water rights to last you decades into the future. Next slide, please. So the intent of these water rights is to add production and move some of the existing city production to wells 11, 12, and 13. So well 11 was drilled a number of years ago, but hasn't been put into production yet. Well 13 was drilled just a few years ago, and again, also hasn't been in production. And well 12, we've done a test boring there, but the well actually hasn't been drilled yet as well. But the idea is to put new water out of these wells and also move some of your existing production from wells down by Sinclair Inlet up into these 3 larger wells. And that also has operational advantages for your water system. Next slide. And I'm going to turn it back to Tom here to talk about this water right history.
Thank you, Joe. So in terms of the city's water right application history, the last new rights for the city were approved in 2005. That was when Ecology authorized well 10, 11, and rights for what's called McCormick 4B, and that's a well that's located on the golf course. And while the city has water rights to that, it's not accessible at this time. That's part of the reason we're trying to move that to another well. Those sources, however, proved not adequate to meet the city's demands. And that's why in 2016, we filed applications to change existing water rights and applications to match the projected need and locations for well 12 and 13, and also to find some additional capacity for well 11. From 2018 to 2024 till today, this Foster pilot qualification that I discussed earlier has been the model for application processing. And Joe has explained, how we started with the demand projections, and his firm has done a considerable amount of groundwater modeling to determine, what impact these new water rights would have on local streams. We have also engaged in a lot of consultation with the Department of Ecology, the Department of Fish and Wildlife, the Suquamish tribe, and the Squaxin Island tribe, because those 2 tribes have usual and accustomed fishing places and treaty rights for the streams that are impacted by the city's new water right applications. So this has been an ongoing process for several years, and we're at the point now where the modeling is done, the impact analysis is complete, and now we're at the point of basically putting together a final mitigation plan, negotiating mitigation agreements with the tribes, and getting a final decision approved by the Department of Ecology. Next slide, please.
Hey, Tom, before you advance that slide, you misspoke there on that first bullet point. Well 4B is actually a private well. We are responsible for managing that water right, but that is the golf course's private well for their irrigation systems. So, and you stated that we were transferring that water right to our system, which isn't accurate.
Yeah, in fact, the water right for that has two quantities to it. And the water right is one of those things that was transferred, I believe. I might be speaking here, and I don't mean to do that, but in the city's water right portfolio that's been reviewed and approved by the Department of Health and Department of Ecology, a portion of the water rights that are associated with that well belong to the city. And we're trying to transfer that portion of the water rights away from that well to well 11 and well 12. So, then the city would be able to access that. Okay. It's not taking the well away from the golf course. They would retain the well, they would retain their own portion of the water rights. But it's just a quirky part of the history of the water rights that there are two pieces of that water right associated with that well.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Mr. Mayor, and also
Yes.
They do report, so they are on a cap of their allowable amount, so they do report that regularly.
Yeah, I'm aware of that. We monitor it, and they're only allowed to pump a certain amount of water each year out of that well.
That's correct. Next slide, please. So I'm going to turn it back to Joe now to talk about the hydrogeology reports and groundwater modeling that he's done. And we've spoken a little bit about this, but he can give you kind of a thumbnail sketch of the work that's been done so far and where we are in that process.
Yeah, as Tom mentioned, it's been a long process. So after the applications were submitted to Ecology in 2016, the Department of Ecology issued preliminary permits to work on the wells. These allowed the new drilling and testing that was required, and they also required that the city do various groundwater studies and groundwater modeling. Those permits were active through 2021. Under those permits, that allowed the city to drill well 13, which was done between 2018 and 2020. It allowed McCormick to do test drilling at the well 12 site between 2019 and 2020 with the cooperation of the city. And then it allowed us to do the required groundwater hydrogeologic studies and modeling to satisfy all the remaining requirements of these permits. So we began that study work in 2019 and completed it in 2022. And I should note here that it wasn't really straightforward, because what we learned through the drilling of well 13 and well 12 is that there's a new deep aquifer underneath the Port Orchard area that had not been previously identified. And the groundwater model that the USGS had put together of the Kitsap Peninsula did not include this new deep aquifer. Yet that is where well 13 is drawing its water from. That is where well 12 is going to draw its water from. So that presented a special challenge to us. And the preliminary permits required us to use the USGS Kitsap model, yet here's the aquifer is not in that model. So we had to modify things and extend the model results. And we were able to do that, and it just took some time. But we finally satisfied all the requirements of the preliminary permit. And once that was done, we started on now the additional studies that needed to be done prior to processing of the water rights under the Foster pilot program. So there were associated engineering studies and water rights studies that were precursors to what we're doing now, done over the last several years. And then, unfortunately, we had to revise the groundwater modeling one last time, and then we just finished that this year. But with that, we were able to determine how much impact the proposed water rights are going to have on area streams. And that provides us a baseline now to work on the mitigation plan. Next slide, please. So as Tom mentioned, under the Foster pilot program, you're allowed to do mitigation, but it has to be in these 3 tiers. So we've put together a mitigation plan following that 3-tiered structure. So for tier 1 is basically saving water, how to avoid impacts. So the way we do that is 1, through the city's conservation plan. So that counts toward that. And then also, when we did our modeling, we looked at a number of different production scenarios. You know, this much water from well 13 and this much water from well 12 and this much water from well 11. And you can move those around and do them at different times. So there was lots of different operational pumping scenarios that could be done. We identified those that had more impact and we identified those that had less impact. And so under tier 1, the city is not going to do the ones that have more impact. But obviously there's still impact, so we have to go to tier 2. So under tier 2, there's basically 2 types of mitigation that are usually used. And that is direct stream augmentation, which is just adding water to a stream. And all the other method is purchasing other water rights and retiring them. So we investigated both these options, and we didn't find any other water rights that would be available to be purchased and retired. So that is not part of our plan, but we did do a study to look at that. And we did find that direct stream augmentation is reasonably available for a number, but not all of the impacted streams. And since we couldn't do that for all of them, that led to tier 3. Under tier 3, our plan includes wetlands restoration, riparian plantings on selected streams, additional stream augmentation above the tier 2 level on one stream. We were also looking at this participation in the Kim Dam removal. The Kim Dam is a small dam on a tributary of the Purdy Creek. However, we just learned a day or 2 ago that the city no longer has the option to participate in that plan. So that's off the books. You can see this is being updated as we speak. So we want to get this nailed down, and that's what we're going to ask for, permission to finish the negotiation of how this mitigation will be put together. Next slide, please. So this map shows the various streams that the modeling indicated would have impacts due to the new water rights. The highlighted streams, Gorse, Parrish, Anderson, Ross, Blackjack, Salmonberry, Curly, and Coulter, can all be mitigated through tier 2 direct stream augmentation. The other streams, the ones further to the south, it's not reasonable to directly augment those streams. So the impacts on those streams are being done under the tier 3 mitigation. Next slide. And I'm going to turn it back to Tom because this one's legal.
Okay. So basically where we are here in terms of defining the mitigation and planning the completion of these applications is, there's a combination of infrastructure and legal items. So already the council is probably familiar with the water system plan update. Water system plan includes a capital facilities element, and that's how the city will be funding wells 13 and 11. Well 12 will be funded by McCormick developer. Other mitigation projects requiring capital investment will be funded under that capital facilities plan. And that's basically new growth pays for the capacity that's being developed through this infrastructure. One of the steps that we will be undertaking in the coming months is developing interlocal agreements for mitigation delivery. So in that last slide, Joe showed the streams where it's reasonably available for the city to do direct augmentation, but some of those streams are outside the city's service area, and we would be entering into interlocal agreements with the city of Bremerton and West Sound Utilities in order to wheel water from Port Orchard through their systems to the delivery points on those streams. So we'll need to negotiate agreements with those utilities for that delivery of our mitigation water. We also anticipate developing a memorandum of understandings with the two tribes, and we're a little bit further along with one tribe than the other, but the concept that we're working with their representatives is that we've had a limited amount of time to identify the best mitigation measures for some of these creeks where we can't augment the stream flow to mitigate for all of our impacts. And over time, we might be able to develop better mitigation. So instead of holding up the water rights process, we want to enter into agreements that will allow us to choose additional or better mitigation as we move forward, and do it in a cooperative way where we're helping, fish and wildlife and ecology and the tribes manage the resources in these streams. It's not a new concept. It's one where, we think it's better to cooperate and try to have a win-win scenario rather than have everything nailed down in one application that for something that's going to take 50 years to develop, and then get a challenge from a tribe that maybe that's too speculative. So we're working on cooperative arrangements with them so that we've got some flexibility to improve this mitigation in the future. And then the infrastructure funding, we've mentioned some of that is by developers, some by connection charges. Next slide, please. So this is a summary here of where we are and where we need to go. Tonight, after bringing you up to speed on this and taking your questions, we're also looking for a nod from the council to proceed with these mitigation negotiations and finalization of a mitigation plan. There's a lot of resources that go into this, these negotiations and the documentation, and we want to make sure you're with us on this one, and we're doing what is in the city's best interest. We think we can complete this mitigation plan, by about April of next year, with your blessing, and have that ready for stakeholder review. And then over the course of the next several months after that, negotiate interlocal agreements with Bremerton and West Sound. The mitigation agreements with the tribes would be simultaneous with that, throughout the next year. And we're hoping for ecology issuance of a final decision in the third or fourth quarter of next year. As long as we can get started on the mitigation planning and we're successful in negotiating, satisfying the concerns that they have with the mitigation plan. I think another element that you'll be seeing in the future is an additional update of the water system plan. There is a segmented approval process by Department of Health, so there are elements of that. I think after the intertie and the new storage and well 12 are completed, there'll be some additional planning and approval there that you will see in the ordinary course coming up. Next slide, please. So that's the conclusion of our presentation, and we're available to take your questions.
With a lot of information. Some of us have been around, unfortunately, through this whole process, about 10 years. And, and long and the short of it is the lawsuit or case law turned this process on its ear. Fortunately, we're one of the pilot cities, otherwise we wouldn't be as far along in this as we are.
Good.
And now the rules have changed, and we're adapting to those new rules and trying to comply as the, work through as these new regulations are developed. And so I know it's a lot of information. What questions do you, I mean, we're nearing the end, which is a good thing, and because we're continuing to grow as a community, and we need these water rights to serve our communities. Jay?
Yeah, I've got a couple. First of all, thanks to staff and to our consultants. This is the first time I've actually felt like we've had a little light at the end of the tunnel, so to speak, with some dates. So thank you very much. So when I understand the impact, what will be with the impact with Bremerton and West Sound? Does that mean we won't be able to end our cross connect with Bremerton, or will we be?
We won't need it. Well, once well 12 and 13 are developed,
right?
We shouldn't need, unless there was some catastrophic event, to purchase water from
right.
them. Because some of the mitigation sites are in their service area and we don't have pipes there, so we have to negotiate an agreement to buy water from them to augment those streams where those are located. Long term, we could have, ideally, we want to connect our two systems. We have the McCormick system and the, this side of the freeway system. Right. For redundancy right now, if we had something, without that intertie, we would be falling back to West Sound on one side of the city or Bremerton for emergency water potentially. But once we develop all of these wells and build the intertie between the two, we should be self-sufficient. So, right. Yes, Joe, you got something you'd add?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that the mayor said you would be buying water from Bremerton. That is a possibility, but it's also possible that instead of buying water, all you're doing is moving water that you produce through their pipes to the mitigation point. So you wouldn't actually be.
I was wondering if we would be sending it that way. Okay. I got two more questions. Okay. Okay. I understood that we were saying that this would be paid for by additional citizens coming, moving in. Would there be an impact, sustainable impact down the road where ratepayers would see an increase because of this, or we don't know right now?
Our capital facilities plan, Nick can speak to this better than I can, but so when we build our capital, just like whether it's transportation, sewer, or water, in this, to your question here about water, when we assign a growth portion, so our ratepayers are responsible for replacing our aging infrastructure.
Right.
The elements related to providing new capacity for new homes, we assign to the capital facilities charge. And so all of our projects have a split. Right. And I think, well 12 is 100% of growth. It's 100%.
Yeah. Okay, so we're still using that model for this project also?
For all of our capital plans are built that way.
And then my last question is, with the MOUs, I appreciate the projection out to 2068. Gives me something to look forward to. But what I'm wondering is, so will the MOUs have various sunset clauses in them?
That's a concept we can work with. I think the primary concern was maybe like the next 10, 12, 15 years. That's when we would, be having to bring on most of the mitigation projects. Some of the streams are impacted very quickly once we start using new wells, but others aren't impacted for a considerable period of time. So it gives us several years to upgrade the mitigation or find mitigation that's more acceptable or meaningful to the tribes than what we're able to propose today. But as far as sunsetting those agreements, that's a provision that we can discuss with the tribes, and so it's not an ongoing obligation of the city. I think that's probably a good concept that we can work with.
Thank you.
Councilmember Fenton, you had a question?
Yes, are all three of these wells, 11, 13, and 12, going towards McCormick, or just 13 and 12?
13 is on the top of the hill in Sedgwick, and it's on this side of the freeway.
Okay.
11 is a well we drilled years ago, and it's near the golf course maintenance shed, where our existing well campus is, and then well 12 is out where the new reservoirs have been built farther out, Old Clifton, and that new campus out there. Yes, sir.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple quick questions. Being new to council, and this has actually been very insightful. Thank you. I did notice at the beginning we had population forecasts. Is any of that dependent on being accurate in that? Because I also noticed like we're already above where you guys had us forecasted for 2024.
I can probably tackle that one.
Okay.
I think it's important to recognize that the city population and the water system population are not the same number. And so you'll see that the 2022 year for the water system population, it looks like it's around 11,500, maybe 12,000. And so some of the city's population is served by West Sound. And so this is a forecast that is just for the city's portion of the city water system area, which is about 2/3 of the city. And so I think that answers your question maybe, but
I guess, John's, I think partly we're growing rapidly right now, and this process was started 10 years ago. Is
Correct.
It still aligned properly?
And even if not, how much does that impact what we're trying to accomplish today if we're off or our rate is now growing faster than what we had predicted or forecasted?
yeah, I think the near term 20-year projection is consistent with our comprehensive plan and our growth targets provided by KRCC. Beyond that, we are, it's not quite as clear, but I think that it is accurate based on our buildable lands capacity within the city and what is possible within the city. But we are not required to plan that far in terms of the planning department. We only look out 20 years. So this is going a little bit further out into the future, and it's really hard to say how things will change in that period of time.
And I would point out too, Joe probably has his hand raised for the same thing, but he's done this model 4 times because we have experienced significant growth. So I'm not sure if that's what you're going to say, Joe.
Go ahead, Joe.
Yes, yeah, I was just going to say the latest revision of the model was because the projection plans, the population projections had changed yet again. So we've done this multiple times, and we are using the most recent ones.
Okay.
We're trying to adapt.
Sure. No, I just curious. A follow up on just because curiosity kills the cat. Is the USGS, when they miss this aquifer that we found as part of this process, does that happen often?
That was yours.
I work with the USGS on a number of projects, and I've worked with them on a number of models. And they have the unenviable task of trying to take a lot of data and make it fit in a regional concept that doesn't always work well when you go to the sub-regional level. And I think that's really what happened in this case. So it happens.
Okay.
I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Joe. We drilled one of these wells is 1,800 or 2,000. Nobody drilled that deep. And so we did, and we found water that wasn't supposed to be there.
Yep. Okay, I was curious. And I think my last question is, and I think it may have been kind of where Councilmember Rosapevi was going, the interlocal agreements for our mitigation delivery, when we're looking at that, are there any cost projections for that for the future? Are we at that point yet even?
We don't have cost projections yet. We're kind of looking for a green light from the council to start those negotiations. But we'll have updates for you at future meetings as we make progress in those negotiations.
Councilmember Warden, I see your hand raised.
Yeah. If the tribe's expectations for mitigation are maybe a little too extreme for us or above what we're able to do. Is there, would the next step be a mitigation, a mediator? I apologize, a mediator, or we just need to cross our fingers and go for it if it happens?
Well, good question. Ultimately, the decision maker here is the Department of Ecology. And the Department of Ecology basically has thrown this in our lap to say, make the tribes happy. Not in so many words, but that's essentially, they want us to make their job easier by working out mitigation agreements that tribes may not be happy with, but they'll settle with and not appeal the decision that Department of Ecology makes. So we're trying to achieve a negotiated agreement that will not result in an appeal of the decision that ecology is expected to make. That said, reaching agreement is not always an easy or simple process. We've been developing relationships with the tribes, as have staff members at the city. It's a little difficult when there's a lot of turnover to keep those relationships refreshed, but basically you have to consider that you're co-managing the resource on the peninsula with the tribes, and we're trying to establish relationships where there's some trust. And working on that trust, we're hoping is going to be the glue that binds an agreement together and gets us through this process.
So ultimately, ecology would have the say-so on the mitigation if it doesn't come to an agreement.
That's correct. And for that, we're making sure that the mitigation plan we draft and the decision, we also have the opportunity to draft the decision that they're going to sign because this is being processed through a cost reimbursement agreement. But, we're trying to draft the decision that they will be compelled to approve. And even if there's not 100% satisfaction with the tribes, we want to get to that point with ecology where they think we've done what we needed to do to get these applications approved under the standards that have been given us by the legislature.
One last question. Is a mitigation a one-time deal, or would it be an annual continuing mitigation?
It depends. Yeah. Some could be restoration of a wetlands, but others are ongoing stream flow augmentation.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Diener.
So I understand the value of water rights. How are we ensuring the value of the mitigation is somewhat proportionate to the water rights? Have we been able to monetize those? I certainly see the value of stream augmentation during periods of low flow during spawning seasons. That makes sense. But if they start asking for additional kinds of mitigation projects, how are we determining that that's really good for us and we're not out of proportion to the water rights that we once sought?
I can let Joe add on to these comments as he sees fit, but at this point, we haven't seen any demands that we think are unaffordable, things that we can't do. Part of the process that we have, this three-tiered process, allows us to, if we can't do projects because they're not reasonably achievable, and you can define that as unaffordable, then we get to use the next tier. And that bottom tier of compensation, we're talking about habitat projects that they should have definable costs. I don't think we're talking about things with runaway price tags. Joe, do you have you want to add on that?
Yeah, the other thing is, so the tier 2 mitigation is water for water. So you have this impact, you're putting this much water in. So it offsets, right? The tier 3 mitigation, the way it's set up is we look at what is the net ecological deficit that the impacts are causing, and what is the the deficit and what is the benefit of the mitigation projects. And those have to offset. So we are proposing mitigation projects that offset the impacts plus a little bit, but not way off the board. And so that kind of gives an accounting to make sure you're not doing more mitigation than you really need to.
Some of those projects could be like Beaver Dam equivalents, where we're doing work in the riparian area of a creek in order to improve some feature of the habitat for fish. And these are projects that would be constructed one time and then have a maintenance obligation over a period of years. But I don't think we're looking at a runaway cost scenario on these projects.
Thank you.
Councilor Chang?
Yeah, I have an annexation-related question. Looking at the charts that we were presented about the customers up to 32,000 and going to 2068, I was wondering, in the event that the city did annex the entire UGA, does that mean the city has to provide water to all the properties in the UGA? For example, if some of their providers are West Sound, does it change because we annex them?
No, it does not.
Good, okay.
So we've annexed most of our service area in McCormick Woods. There's only a few little pockets out that direction, and the larger portion of our UGA is served by West Sound Utility.
And they would still be served by them even if they were annexed into the city?
They're not part of this water rights.
Okay.
Councilmember Rose Pepe?
So I guess from my perspective, I'm not hearing anything that we should move forward with the proposals.
I don't believe we have any choice.
Well, I know, but they're looking for a thumbs up, and I'm going yes.
We're educating you guys, letting you know where we're at in this process, making sure that you guys weren't freaking out on us.
Nope. Mark.
So I think this is for Joe, and forgive me if I'm not wording this right, but so I kind of look at this as the mitigation area is the width or space is funnel shaped. So the deeper these wells are, the wider our mitigation area could potentially be. How far, you mentioned not being able to go, or not talking about going south, very far south. We can only go east a certain amount of space before the sound's here. How far west do you think this might take the city into?
All the way to
mitigation?
Sheldon. Seriously.
All the way to Sheldon?
We impact water that are.
So in our modeling, we looked at impacts on the Union River, and we, for various hydrogeologic reasons, we didn't extend past the Union River, and we didn't extend on the other side of Sinclair Inlet, and we extended on the south to, the water down by Gig Harbor. So it's all based on that modeling and where we saw the impacts.
Far reaching.
Okay.
So the one thing I should add is you are correct. The deeper the well, the farther out the impacts are, but the lesser the total is. So if you used shallow wells, you would have to mitigate maybe 75% or 80% of what you're taking out. You would have to put right back into the stream. But because we're using deep wells, it's a much smaller percentage. It's about 25%, 20%, somewhere in there.
All right, thank you.
Any last questions? We'll move on to our business items. Okay, thank you, Joe, Tom. Appreciate your time tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it.
All right, we don't have any public hearings, and so we'll get on to our business items. The first of which is item A, adoption of a resolution authorizing the mayor to execute a custom street light order, Schedule 51, with PSE to provide lighting services for the Bethel Lincoln Mitchell Roundabout project. Mr. Ryan, this is you.
Thank you. Before you is a resolution that would authorize the city to enter into an agreement with Puget Sound Energy for the procurement of the streetlights, this is part of the Bethel Mitchell roundabout. This is just for the first phase. This was anticipated as part of the original project. Total amount for the purchase is $84,816.04. The staff recommends adopting the resolution to authorize the mayor to sign the contract with the PSC to proceed with the work. Again, so this was part of the original contract. The infrastructure is there. We have the conduits and they're ready to be energized. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
Councilmember Morrissey, go ahead.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I make a motion to adopt a resolution authorizing the mayor to sign a custom street lighting order, Schedule 15, with PSC to design and install street lighting for the Bethel Lincoln Mitchell Roundabout project.
Second.
By Councilmember Morrissey, a second by Councilmember Diener. Any questions, Mr. Ryan? Go ahead.
So, Mr. Ryan, I understand that originally this program or this project started out as a two-part or two roundabouts included in this program. We've kind of since separated them out. Are this lighting is for the Mitchell roundabout? Is that correct?
That is correct.
And any projection on when they may be installed?
I do not have a lead time as far as the delivery. So I'm anticipating that once we approve this, that they will get the order in. I can provide an update and we'll inquire.
All right, thank you.
PSC typically is having some extremely long lead times on everything, but it starts with first getting paid on their side. So, did you have a question, Councilmember?
Yeah, how many light fixtures are going to go around that roundabout?
I don't have the plans in front of me. We do a light study every time we do a capital project, so there is a design with the lumens that are required for a public roadway. I will provide that information later.
Mark seems to think it's 2.
There's 2 on this exhibit. Exhibit A, those 2 poles, 2 lights.
And then there's a second phase to this project, which is the larger roundabout over on Bethel. Any other questions? Okay, you'll be voting on a resolution approving the mayor to execute a custom street lighting order with Puget Sound Energy. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously. We moved item B to January 14th. Item C is approval of an amendment to an agreement number 043-24 with Curzana Associates for on-call services materials testing. Mr. Ryan, this is you.
Thank you. This is a resolution that would authorize the continuation of a contract with Curzana and Associates. City of Port Orchard requires ongoing materials testing services for our capital projects. Previously, the city entered into a contract with Curzana for on-call materials testing. This is for everything from concrete testing for the Marina Pump Station, which was several hundred yards, to the City Hall project. We also use them for compaction testing when we're doing our overlays. Recently, we used them at the 730 Prospect building to do our due diligence. So this is an ongoing professional service that city uses. We did select them through the MRC consultant roster. The increase of the contract amount would go from $25,000 to $50,000. Funding for the extension is provided in the 2025-2026 biennial budget. Staff recommends that council authorize the mayor to enter into this agreement.
Councilmember Trineri.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to motion to authorize you to execute amendment number 1 to contract number 043-24 with Curzana Associates of Washington, Inc. for an on-call materials testing.
Second.
Motion by Councilmember Trineri, a second by Councilmember Fenton. Remember, this is on-call services, and so you're giving budget authority, so as those needs come along, where we need somebody to go out and test something for us, we've got them on contract, we can expedite that much quicker than having to procure it and wait for that public process each time we go to do something out in the field. So, any questions? Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just one completely squirreled item for the creator of the packets. Our motions start all with staff recommends tonight, so that might be something to look at for future reference. And then 2, I believe I saw Director Crocker was online somewhere. I just want to verify, because it also says, oh, excellent. I saw you on my screen earlier, but there you are. Fiscal impact shows 12.5 and 12.5. Is that 12.5 each year for both of those areas? Because that doesn't get me to the 50 that we're trying to increase this by. Or will this require a budget amendment in the future?
I can verify that. I'll do that while we're in the meeting, but I think it could require a future budget amendment. Again, this is an up to contract, so it's not guaranteed. So there is budget authority to keep this moving forward, and we'll kind of monitor it as it approaches city max. But I'll get the exact number for 25.
Thank you.
And these are the type of items too where we're not sure how much we're going to spend. So at the mid-year review, we'll go, oh, we spent 5,000 or we spent 30,000, and we need to put, we've got a contract for 50. How much more do we need to put into the budget to get us to the second half of the biennium? All right, other questions? You'll be voting on the approval of an amendment to Agreement 043-24 with Curzan Associates for on-call material testing. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Hearing none, the amendment is approved. We're at item D, approval of an amendment to an agreement. A lot of tongue-tie twisters here. Number 029-22 with Consor North America, Inc. For the general sewer plant update for the city's sanitary sewer system. Mr. Ryan, this is you.
So thank you again. This resolution is for the general service plan and the use of Consor Engineering for our general sewer plan. Consor was selected through a competitive RFQ process. Subsequent previous amendments included amendment number 1 when the consultant's name changed from Consor North America. I'm sorry, it was a name change to Consor. Amendment number 2, 3, and 4 were time extension only, authorized by the Public Works Director. The city in Consor agreed that additional work is necessary to complete the general sewer plan, including population projections. That's been a little tricky, as we've heard in our previous presentation. We are growing at a tremendous rate, so additional work is needed. Sewer modeling is part of that. Capital improvement plan is just wrapping up. So the contract increase would be by $22,623, raising the total from $140,396 to $163,019. Staff recommends that council authorize mayor to approve this.
Councilmember Chang?
I move to authorize the mayor to execute Amendment 5 to contract number C02922 with Consor North America, Inc. for the general sewer plan update.
Second.
Motion by Councilmember Chang, a second by Councilmember Trenary. Any questions for Mr. Ryan? You'll be voting to approve an agreement with Consor North America for our general sewer plan. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, the amendment to the agreement has been approved. We're to item E, which is adoption of a resolution approving the final plat of McCormick West Division 14. Mr. Bond, this is you.
Right, good evening, Mayor and members of council. Before you tonight is the final plat of Division 14 of McCormick West, creating 158 residential lots and 10 tracts. McCormick West was approved in 2008 by Kitsap County and then was annexed by the city of Port Orchard and has subsequently been amended twice through minor plat amendments. The developer has constructed all of the improvements in McCormick West except for a handful of items which they are proposing to post a performance bond they have posted a performance bond for those items subject to city council acceptance. The items that remain incomplete, they have sewer cleanouts bonded at $308,000. Some sidewalk, water meter setters, and hydrant testing work that is, the sidewalk is $2,850, the water meter setters is $193,000, and the hydrant testing is $56,154. And so they've also bonded street trees at $133,000 and $4,800 worth of replacing ADA sidewalk ramps that have to be replaced because they weren't quite at the right grade. Staff recommends approving the final plat as presented, including acceptance of the performance bonds that we have received.
Mayor, I move to adopt resolution as presented, granting final plat approval for McCormick West Division 14.
Second.
Motion by Councilmember Rosepepe, a second by Councilmember Diener. All right, questions?
Nick, I know this is a small thing, and it's just the fact that the names changed of the, divisions to McCormick Trails, and I can't remember the other one off the top of my head. Does that should those be reflected in future documents, or because this has been ongoing from the planning stages with the original names, does it make a difference? It's a minor point, I'm just asking.
It is confusing, but I don't think it makes a huge difference. McCormick West was the name used in the preliminary plat.
Exactly.
McCormick Trails is what they are calling it on the final plat documents and what the signage says that's installed out there.
I just wanted to make the distinction in case people, wondering.
Councilmember Trinier?
Please educate me. Mr. Ryan or Mr. Bond, what constitutes a water meter setter?
So the little box that is out usually at the street that your water meter is installed in, so that you connect the water meter to the water meter setter and then your service line to your house. So the setters go on the end of the water service line.
And they look like a harp. So they're copper tubing, and that's the apparatus that connects to the meter.
Spend your little deals.
Yeah.
It's a
And
whole
they call
bunch
them
of them.
different in every agency.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I know this has been ongoing and, people signed it to, like December 11th or today. Now, I noticed that Mark Dorsey had his name on a lot, but there was no date on there. So, it probably doesn't even matter, but I was just curious about that.
So our template still had Mark Dorsey's name on it, and so he obviously hasn't worked for the city for quite some time, but we don't sign the document until council has approved the final plat, and so Mark Dorsey's name will be crossed out and it will be replaced with Dennis Ryan.
Oh, okay.
Other questions? Go ahead, Councilmember Chang.
I was delighted to hear Mr. Krabby talk about the lots that were 40 feet wide or less that are, I guess, more available for the more affordable type of housing. And I was just wondering, looking at the maps, are these lots all in one section, or are they interspersed amongst the 158? Are you aware?
My recollection, there's a large tract, I believe it's labeled 14C, if my eyes are leading me correctly. And all of the lots, that's a park tract. They're going to put in a private park on that piece of land. And so the alley loaded lots are directly across from that park, and then also directly behind the alley that divides the block. So I think if you look at page 412 of the packet, you will see the park tract. It's kind of a semicircle, half moon kind of shape.
Mm-hmm. So they're sort of clustered around that area.
Yeah, I think there are lots on, I'm seeing 402 through 408, and then 423 through 415 are the numbers that are easy to read on my packet. There's some other text blocking some of the other lot numbers, but that's generally where you're looking.
Okay, thank you.
Questions? Hearing none, you'll be voting on a resolution approving the final plat of McCormick West Division 14. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, the resolution passes. Our new item F was previously consent G, which is the approval of an invoice with Kitsap Regional Coordinating Council for the pre-approved accessory dwelling unit program. Mr. Bond, do you want to speak to this?
Yeah, this is an exciting project that we finally received the invoice for, and so because this was it wasn't specifically called out in the budget, we're asking the City Council to make a motion just to approve us paying this bill. The KRCC, the Kitsap Regional Coordinating Council, is made up of the jurisdictions within Kitsap County, so Port Orchard, Bremerton, Paulsbo, Bainbridge Island, our tribal partners, the Navy, are all part of the organization. And the board, in furtherance of trying to provide affordable housing options within Kitsap County, decided to use some surplus money that the agency currently holds to pursue a pre-approved accessory dwelling unit program. And so the program, the idea behind it is to hire an architect to design pre-approved ADUs that would go through the plan review process and would be on file in all of the cities in the county, and then any resident landowner within Kitsap County can apply for a building permit. They don't have to hire an architect and draw plans. They do have to prepare a site plan, but otherwise they just go to the city, they pay for their permit, they pay their connection fees for water and sewer, impact fees, and then they can hire their contractor and go build the things. So the KRCC, we did a qualifications-based selection process, and that's an RFQ process, and we received nine different statements of qualifications from different architects. All the cities scored them. Actually, Councilmember Rosa Pepe was on the committee that helped select the preferred consultant, and so we interviewed the top 4 and ultimately selected the Artisans Group as the most qualified firm for the job, and then went to work negotiating a contract with them. One of the things we liked about them is that they are already doing this type of program in Thurston County, and so Tumwater, Lacey, and Olympia, and I think the county as well, are all already using 4 pre-approved plans that Artisans designed. And so as part of the contract that KRCC signed, we're getting access to the 4 plans that are already designed, plus they're going to design 2 more for us. And so the total cost of the project was more than the surplus money that KRCC had, and so each jurisdiction is being asked to kick in $11,500, and that is our additional share. I think I reported on this to you over the summer, and as well as to the Land Use Committee, and so this is just bringing finally the payment forward that was needed to support this program. And we are hopeful that the first pre-approved plans should be available in February. If all goes well, we're actually doing the plan review right now. And so assuming that there aren't a whole lot of revisions, or that the revisions don't take a lot of time, we think we are going to be able to announce to the public that those are available. And then the second plans, which one of them is a large ADU. I think it's going to be 1,000 square feet, which is the largest size ADU allowed in any of the member jurisdictions, as well as a carriage house ADU where it will be a garage with an apartment above it. Those 2 plans are being designed and will be available probably this summer. So the contract we signed, this payment does not include actually paying for updating the plans for the next building code cycle, which will come out about 2 years from now. But we did create an option in the contract so that we can pay for that work in the future. And so we'll probably end up each having to chip in a little bit of money 2 or 3 years from now to update the plans to keep the program going. Is there anything else, Mayor, on this that you'd like to share?
I believe the number was 50,000 in reserves we had at KRCC. It wasn't enough to cover it all, so then we divided it up against all the member cities and county to get to this number. So I think it's a great program to have these plan sets. It's expensive to have something engineered and designed, and to have these available could hopefully create some affordable housing in our community. So Councilmember Diener, did you want to make a motion?
Yeah, I'll make a motion. I move to approve payment of an invoice for $11,500 to the Kitsap Regional Coordinating Council for the pre-approved accessory dwelling unit program.
I second it.
Motion by Councilmember Diener, second by Councilmember Fenton. Go ahead.
Just one last comment, and Nick, correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the, besides their plans being used in another county already, this group in their plans had ADA in their plans already for people to take, since one of the items we're looking at is for older population. So that was one of the bonuses with this group. So strongly, this is definitely moving forward.
So this is a pretty exciting program that when it's done will remove one of the barriers for people to develop certain kinds of housing. So that's pretty cool. The firm that was chosen is a woman-owned firm. They're pretty impressive in what they were able to present. So that was good news as well. And I think everybody is embracing this program. And what's interesting is if you have the same wind load and snow load, you could take one of these plans and go anywhere in the state with it. It's that usable. And if you want to make changes to it, then that takes you out of sort of the basic plan set that would be pre-approved, and you can go to the architect and say, I'd like to do this entrance a little differently, and they can work with you on that. So it's a great program. Excited to see how well it's taken on.
Last questions? Councilmember Chang, go ahead.
I love this. I was looking at the examples on pages 56 through 58. They're very impressive. And I guess a question that I had, or needed clarification, is that having had some experience in putting one in my backyard, I know some neighbors have different expectations about the type of notice that they're expecting. And my understanding is that if it is allowed, as we allow it, there are not going to be any yellow signs saying that notice of construction.
State law. I believe
Okay,
changed that.
so I don't know if maybe when this happens, part of the plan to announce the plans is also let people know that these things may be appearing, if not in their backyard, but their neighbors, and that it's just allowed.
Well, so I can speak to that a little bit. First of all, we do not provide notice for type 1 permits, which are permitted outright. And the new state law for ADUs, which takes effect, I think, June 30th of 2025, we can't actually add a requirement for an ADU that doesn't also apply to a single family house. So I think if we chose to require notice, we'd also have to do it for every single family house that is built in the city. And I don't think that's probably a good use of staff resources to have to write out all of those signs with us building 300 or 400 homes a year in the city. So in terms of, sorry, what was the second part of your question?
So I can speak to the outreach part.
Oh, yeah.
We've already drafted a messaging piece, but we're sitting on it because the plans haven't been approved.
They're not
yet.
ready,
We want to announce this when the plans are approved and they're available, and that's when we're going to do the outreach piece of this to inform the community. Now, will everybody pay attention to that? No. But at least we've done our part to say, hey, we're doing this, and these plans are available, and we're excited about it.
And here's why we're doing this.
And there is a website, KRCC has created an ADU website that is now linked from the DCD website for the city. And so we have a tab on the left-hand column of our department's website with just a brief overview that this program is coming, and then there's a link to the KRCC site. And as things get closer to launch, we will add to that content. And I did want to say, you pointed out a page number in the packet. It's actually page 44 of the packet that includes the 4 units that we are getting that are pre-approved. And so I think the examples that you were seeing were in the statement of qualifications, but some of those may have been custom homes rather than the ones that were part of our package here.
Okay, thank you for the responses, because I think that with this sort of infill development, people are not used to seeing something in their neighbor's backyard. And I think anything we can do to educate them that this is allowed, it's encouraged, it's happening, it's not against the law, we haven't, forgotten to tell you because we don't need to, would be a good message to get out. I know a lot of people thought that they should have been told that I was doing something in my backyard. And I did put the plans on Facebook, but guess what? Not everyone looks at Facebook. And they don't see what's going on, across the street until they actually see a shovel in the ground. So I figured anything we can do to just let people know would be great.
Any last questions? All right, you'll be voting on approval of an invoice with Kitsap Regional Coordinating Council for the pre-approved accessory dwelling unit program. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, the invoice has been approved. We're to our last business item, item G, which was previously consent item F, which is approval of a contract with Western Washington University Small Business. And this would be you, Ms. Wallace.
Yes, good evening, Mayor, Council. So the city initiated this contract to help with business counseling, Small Business Development Center, sponsored training for participants, and to provide professional development and business strategies for those participants. They spoke about this in great lengths at their presentation to the council at the September 10th, 2024 City Council meeting. They have agreed to keep the same cost as the previous year's contract. Therefore, the yearly amount for their services for 2025 is $10,000 to be billed quarterly at $2,500 between January and December of 2025. And then in 2026, the same contract amount of $10,000 to be billed monthly in an amount of $2,500 between January and December of 2026. Staff recommends approving this contract as presented.
Member Morrissey.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move to approve the contract with Western Washington University's Small Business Development Center for small business development as presented.
Second.
Motion by Councilmember Morrissey, a second by Councilmember Rosa Pepe. We've been participating, it seems like yesterday, but I bet it's 4 or 5 years or more. Western Washington University supports this program, but you know, they don't pay for all of it. And so I think all of the cities in the county contribute to this program, and it provides counseling and support services to a small business person, because many of them don't have the tools and the knowledge to start their small business or at least start it and succeed. And that's what this is about. So, Councilmember Morrissey?
Yeah, I'll just put in a couple of good words for it as well. I know it's not just governmental agencies that invest. There are multiple financial institutions locally that have invested in this as well, that even have a larger investment than what they're asking from a municipality. On the flip side, being a recipient, it is completely free to anyone in the county. If you would like to be a customer or member or whatever they call us. Client, I guess, is probably the accurate term. I've used them. Additionally, I will give them large kudos for last year when we had flooding along Bay Street. They proactively reached out to businesses affected with resources to overcome their flooding expectations. So it's anything from flooding to how do I make a business plan to how do I get a loan. They do a ton and are a really great organization for us to support. Thank you.
Joyce quite frequently meets with people here at City Hall, so we make conference rooms available to her. Councilmember Fenton?
Yeah, and I just wanted to learn more about it. That's why I wanted to discuss it instead of just go by. I was kind of curious, how do they do their advertisement, and how many, well, you said on flooding, but I'm kind of curious how many businesses in our city use them, and how many, came to them, and who were they?
I don't believe we could answer that. That was part of her presentation.
In September, she answered that for us.
She came and gave us a presentation with businesses she served and where they were from and so on and so forth. There was a lengthy presentation that she gave us.
Right, and just in our city, or was it more?
It was at City Council on September the 10th.
Yes. And I mean, she was talking about just the businesses in our city. It wasn't like a whole bunch of businesses. That's what I'm kind of
I think she did a little bit of both.
about.
I think she did a little bit of both because
Yeah.
she talked about the greater county and how much,
Right.
as well as, like I was testimonial that I was one of her clients in the past year.
Right. No, and then how do they advertise so the businesses, can take advantage of this program?
I don't know that they spoke to how they did their advertising or marketing, but I can find out for you. And
Joyce is regularly attending every chamber luncheon that I've been at, KETA events, networking events.
POPSA events?
But I don't know if I've seen her at a POPSA event, but I for sure have at the South Kitsap Chamber of Commerce.
During
That'd be
COVID,
good.
she did come to POPSA.
Did she?
I have seen her at POPSA, but it's not something she frequents. But yeah, she's out there. All right, any last questions? You'll be voting on a contract with Western Washington University for Small Business Development Center. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Hearing none, the contract has been approved. Let's see, we don't have any discussion items, and I don't believe any committees have met, so I'm not going to run through all of them because I don't believe any committees met in the last week. Finance got canceled this evening. I will speak to the mayor's report. Let me find it. King Tides are happening right now, and yesterday morning and this morning. Fortunately, so we have been having 13-foot tides in the morning and 11-foot about 5 o'clock tonight, was it, Dennis? We've had folks available. We've got a couple of trash pumps to help try to subside the Puget Sound in downtown, but the best we can. So the heavy rains were this evening. They weren't this morning. We're going to, and the forecast tomorrow morning, when the higher tide is.
Tomorrow's the highest, right?
It is, but it's also drier. If we had tonight's weather with tomorrow morning's tide, we'd have a problem. But I think we're gonna skate through this, at least I hope we do. And we'll have one more series again next month, I think, and then we'll be through the worst of this. So, but we are monitoring it, and Councilmember Morrissey asked me about it a couple days ago. I wanted to let you guys know too, Councilmember Chang asked about the public information contract, and how much we used of it. And I'm gonna blame the attorney on this one, because there was language in this contract. So we did have budget authority, okay, but there's language in the contract that requires us, and not in our policies, but in the contract, that we can only spend $25,000 a year. And we were a few thousand short the first year, but the contract said I could only spend $25,000 this year. So we went $100 over that this month, and so I have change order authority. So I was able to work through a process to approve that, but I'll probably have to do that. That was November's invoice, and I bet there's going to be a December's invoice that will have to work the same process. So we nearly used all of that 50,000, and we used more of it in the latter half of this year. So we'll monitor that a little closer, and maybe next time we renew that contract, we'll take that language out that says I can't spend more than 25,000 in 1 year. So, just caught Brandy and I off guard, but accounts payable caught it, and they're like, you can't pay this, and I pay it.
Nice job.
So, Finance Department caught it. So we had the coolest experience today at South Kitsap Rotary Club at noon today. So last Tuesday, Trish Van Ravenhorst, who is the founder of Backpacks for Kids, came to our club and shared that rodents had gotten into the food, and they'd lost $10,000 worth of food. And our club stepped up and was willing to match donations. And Tish's typical donation is $5 here and $10 there. And she was quite distressed on how they were going to provide backpacks with meals in them to the children of our community through the Christmas break. I came back to the office, and Amber Lewis from the Suquamish tribe reached out to me just a few hours later and said, hey, we've got some money that we'd like to deploy to a nonprofit in Port Orchard. Have any good ideas? And boy, did I. So it's pretty cool. I asked Tish to come back to our Rotary Club today, and gosh, probably a half a dozen people from Port Madison Enterprises, their business side, tribal council members, all came and presented her with a $10,000 check today. And yeah,
wow,
there were some tears shed.
That was pretty fast.
It was
too.
Yeah, sure. Well, Amber talked to me. I told her about it. Within 2 hours, she called me back. I have a $10,000 check. How do we want to do this? And I said, let's go make a big deal out of it. So
nice. And the club's matching that?
no, I don't know about that.
Oh, okay. I thought I heard you say something about matching.
Yeah, we were matching donations up to 5.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So
nice.
we might be.
Nice.
So I'm not on the board,
Yeah,
so I don't know.
No, that's awesome. Awesome. Awesome.
Damage of what those rats
Yes,
did was
yes,
10,000?
They ate 10,000. Yeah, $10,000 worth of food was destroyed. So, all right. How about some history? So, 50 years ago, Buck Gehring came to, which is Rick Gehring's father. Buck's A&W, the old, with the car hops and everybody, came to the city to discuss plans for a commercial complex. Well, this planning of that started 50 years ago, and I think it was opened in the late 70s, early 80s, so it took a while to make that happen, but that was when the first discussions started coming. 75 years ago, a rep from Burroughs Adding Machine Company came and gave a presentation to the city on information on a new type of adding machine that would modernize the water billing and accounting system. with an adding machine of all things. So we stopped maybe using so much paper. I don't know. And 100 years ago, you know how you guys get your check registered mailed to you? So 100 years ago, the check register was published in the council agenda and approved in that manner. And 100 years ago, I pulled out 3 items. Mr. C.E. Lansford was paid $8 for 2 days worth of work. We paid P.D. Jocelyn $2.75 for the wood that he delivered for the City Hall fireplace to heat. And we approved the purchase of $98.51 of pipe at Howe Hardware for 300 feet of sewer pipe. So there's our history lesson. It was a little cheaper back then. I don't know that $100 gets us more than not even 10 feet of sewer pipe these days, but all right, department heads. Mr. Ryan, do you have anything to report?
I do. Just a quick follow-up on the lights at the Mitchell-Lincoln roundabout. So just that first phase we're doing. Looks like we have 7 drops for lighting to go in there. I can't tell you if any of those are part of the next phase, but it does look like that 7 drops have been installed there. So, and then additionally, I had a question earlier about the Lippert-Sydney lighting plan. That is still in design, so it is still ongoing. And then a quick update on Paul Powers Park. We've had some vandalism there throughout the years. It's in a little bit disrepair, so the crews will be taking it offline for what's still there, and we'll be doing a rehab there, so we expect to open that back up about the first week of January. Thank you. And happy holidays.
Mr. Crocker.
I just wanted to follow up on the earlier question on Crezan. So currently we've spent roughly $16,000 on the original $25,000 contract. So there could potentially be some carryover for that. And so the question is, do we have budget authority? We do have budget authority for the full $50,000, although it's difficult to see it in the budget because it's an on-call contract, and depending on what we use them for, what project, whether it's going to hit a general fund type project or a street type project, it's going to hit a different fund. But overall, we should have plenty of budget authority.
Thanks for that clarification. Mr. Bond?
Yeah, just one announcement tonight. I've reported previously that our department is leading the Sherman Avenue Stormwater Park Planning Project. I wanted to let the council know that we did some outreach in a way that we haven't done in the past, and we're getting really good turnout. We actually had door hangers printed and went to every apartment complex in our target area there south of Tremont and along Sydney Avenue, and are getting really good participation. We also mailed postcards to all properties, but the apartments are harder to hit because we don't have mailing addresses for all of them. So we're keeping that survey open through the end of this year, and then we will be summarizing those results after the first year. But if you haven't had a look at the survey, there's a link on our website, and I would encourage you to check it out. Thanks.
Thank you. Ms. Archer?
Thank you so much. Just very quickly, there was a very interesting case decision yesterday. The city of Sammamish fought off a public records challenge that involved records requests for council members' messaging app documents, and this is of particular interest for all cities. The council members at that city utilized the app WhatsApp, as well as other more transitory apps. And in order to do an adequate search under the Public Records Act, the court has held that the individual council members, as we've already known but sort of emphasized, have to complete these affidavits that attest to the fact that you have searched all of your apps, even personal devices, if you are using them for city purposes. And that encompasses WhatsApp, Snapchat, all of the potential apps that you've used for city purposes. And the court held that the city had done an adequate search by requiring affidavits of all of its electeds and pushing very hard against pushback from those electeds, current and former electeds, when some were reticent to provide those affidavits. But absent getting those affidavits, my read of the case is the city would not have been found to have been compliant with the PRA. So getting those affidavits is very, very important, a very big component of Brandy's job. So if you ever have a question about one of those affidavits, I'm happy to chat about them. But yes, it was both current and former council members that they had to get those from. So if the request encompasses that big of a window, the city had to push and get those. The one aspect the city really truly won on was the plaintiff wanted the court to hold an adequate search requires the city to sue elected officials who don't produce the affidavits. In that case, thankfully, no one withheld an affidavit. The plaintiff believed a former elected had lied on their affidavit. The court said we don't have to sue our employees or our electeds, asking them, getting it from them, and showing it as the truth, because that's what we're told, is sufficient. So it's a very interesting opinion. I'm happy to circulate it for some light reading over the break, but enjoy. Happy holidays. Thanks.
Mrs. Lund.
The Cliff Note version.
Thank you. I wanted to give you a heads up. The Inclusion Commission is working on a presentation that they will be bringing to you in January or February to give you an update on their work and to provide that annual update for you. One of the things that the Inclusion Commission is working on as a result of the employee survey is a recognition of all of the types of holidays that people may celebrate based on their culture and on their religious background. Mayor sent out an all-employee message to that effect, and with tonight being the last meeting before the Christmas break, I thought I would share some of those with you very quickly. Some will be familiar, some may not be, and I may mispronounce some. So in the month of December, Buddhists celebrate Bodhi Day. Of course, Hanukkah, winter solstice, Christmas, Kwanzaa, and then one called Zartashnodisho. I'm sure I butchered that. That has to do with the Zoroastrianism group. So there's just a whole variety of things we don't necessarily think about, and that's one of the kind of the goals of the Inclusion Commission is to think about those things we don't necessarily see by just looking at physical appearances and observing our coworkers. There's other things going on. So you'll be getting their report in January or February, and happy holidays.
Wallace?
Yes, I just wanted to point out, I'm not sure if you noticed on the agenda that there were no minutes on there, and so we are working on the backlog of the minutes, and those will all be caught up at the first meeting in January. So we'll get those to you as soon as we can.
Christmas
and
gift
then,
from the clerk.
Yeah. And then I remembered that in the contract it does state that they provide us reports with their invoices. So they provide us quarterly reports as to, and this is the Western Washington for Small Business Development Center. So what I have on the screen for you is a snippet. It's a 14-page report that they sent with the last quarter of what we paid out, which is Q3 for 2024. They talk about, just real quickly, what they've done for Kitsap County as a whole with the money. And then as you go through the reports, it highlights and then it even breaks it down to their marketing efforts. And I'll send this out to the full council. And then as you get down to the bottom, at the end of the report, it actually breaks it down to what they did by jurisdiction. And so they're saying that the number of businesses that they advised in the third quarter of 2024 for Port Orchard was 12. And then they worked about 38 hours. So I will get this off to you. You can have it for future reference. And that's all I have to
about
report.
it. I wanted to learn a little bit more. Yeah.
Right, that concludes. Go ahead.
I just want to wish everybody happy holidays, staff for their hard work, and peers for the work that they have to do as well. And happy holidays, and be safe out there.
Just pause for a moment here. I didn't ask for the second citizen comment period. I don't see anybody in the audience. That's why I missed it. But is there anybody online wishing to address the council?
There is not.
Brandy says no. So sorry to interrupt. So
No, you heard it. Happy holidays, everybody.
That would be ditto. And staff, mayor, and fellow council members, happy holidays and happy new year.
won't see you again till January 14th. So Councilor Marchenko.
Yeah, I just wanted to remind everyone, if you didn't know, that Royal Tandoor opened tonight. It's the new Indian restaurant and the former Cosmos.
Oh,
And I just recently found out
They
that
haven't opened yet. They don't have the prior suppression certificate.
someone printed their menu and announced that they were opening.
They got their menu out a while ago.
They're not, they should be, hopefully
I
they'll
think
be
they're
open
open
this
next week. is
Oh,
it?
they don't have a certificate of occupation. Okay,
They do
never
not.
mind. There was a rumor that they were opening today.
opening soon.
Yeah, there was a rumor. Never mind. There was a rumor with a
They're
pictures
still
of
working
a-
with the building department on their fire
Oh,
suppression
okay,
system.
well, it is coming and that's exciting. And I just also recently discovered that the police department has their own Facebook page. It's an official Facebook page. It's actually very nice. It mirrors their Instagram page, and if you haven't already, go and like it. So,
And I've got an exciting event on Friday, swing shift. I'll be out doing a ride-along with Sergeant Donna Main. So behave
Nice.
yourselves out there. I'll be riding around with Donna Main.
Which And I just, I took a tour over at the high school this morning, and there was a group of us, and we went all over the school into some classrooms, and I sure learned a lot. And it was very educational, and they do tours almost like 6 or 7 times out of the year. So if you ever want to go and do a tour or ask the superintendent and some of the teachers, yeah, it was very eye-opening, and I was sure appreciative of the tour.
Right? Anything else? Okay. Meeting is adjourned. Happy holidays.
Yeah, we've been waiting for it to open.
Recording stopped.
Very excited. Very excited.